Hi, I'm Chris Tebbett and I'm a rector here at Canford Magna Parish Church. For those of you who are unable to make our Vision Refresh morning on the 15th of June, I wanted to just share in this PowerPoint presentation a few of the highlights of our new refreshed vision. So welcome to our Vision Refresh presentation. I'm sorry you were unable to get to the Vision Refresh morning, but I'm going to try and cover in the next few minutes as much of the material that we covered on the Vision morning as possible. Our first slide here has a great quote from the book of Habakkuk. Write down the vision, write it clearly, so whoever reads it can run to tell others. And the purpose of this talk now and this presentation is for you to be able to clearly understand what the vision of Canford Magna Parish Church really is. Well, we've had a vision in place for some time, and it's focused on three key areas of worship, spiritual growth and discipleship, and mission. But now what I've done for this Vision Refresh is to update that with two new areas of truth and social justice and community action. So I just want to cover the first area, worship. Well, of course, worship is central, absolutely central to all that we do as Christians, and it's really important that we have worship which really connects with people. And what I've found is that we have, at the moment, if you go on to the next slide, which is the one which shows the two centres of worship that we have, the Parish Church and the CMC. What I've found is we're connecting with unchurched people very well in the CMC, but we're running out of space. So what we need to do is to increase the amount of space we have in the CMC, and I'll cover that a bit later on in the presentation. But also in the Parish Church, what we're not doing is connecting with younger people really in our 10:30 service. So what I'm suggesting we do is introduce two morning services. The first one at 9 o'clock is very similar to today's 10:30 communion service. So we'll have communion every week. And then a later 10:45, more contemporary, a freer worship service with contemporary music and Bible teaching, which is really there to connect with people of all ages, really, but particularly those of the younger generation who are looking for applied Bible teaching, which they can be applied to their everyday life. One of the other things that's restricting about the parish church is the fact that we really need to reorder the space to give us a flexible worship area. And so my plans for this vision, really, looking ahead 5-10 years, are to eventually reorder the church. And again, I'll come on to that a bit later on in this presentation. So the next slide is about discipleship. It's about spiritual growth. It's about growing in depth. And this wonderful quote from John 8:31-32 reminds us that we need to be growing spiritually in our discipleship if we're really to become disciples. So what about the detail of spiritual growth? Well, that's in the next slide. And in a way, there's nothing drastically new here, except perhaps structured prayer. We've had various attempts to meet together to have a corporate prayer meeting in our church, and it's not really worked very well until recently, when we've been meeting at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening, and we found a number of people wanting to gather at that time. It's before our main house group evening, which is of course Tuesday, and our Tuesdays Together group. And we've had an increasing number of people meeting for that prayer meeting on a Tuesday at 6:30. It lasts for just 45 minutes. We're also introducing a younger women's group, and I think I'd like to see us is to have groups really that cover all the ages in the church if we're looking ahead to the future. Of course, there's always interest groups, people who are particularly interested in, sailing or mountain biking. There's a possibility in the future of introducing interest groups where people can also gather to study the Bible, where they have a common interest. We also have our discipleship roadmap, which really covers people coming into the church at a kind of early stage of their development, right through to reasonable spiritual maturity, and those who want to go deeper by looking at structured theological study may want to go on and do a degree in theology, or take up one of the leadership courses offered by, for example, CPAS, or may even want to go on to look at ordination or becoming a lay minister in our church. So those are great possibilities. Spiritual growth is really important. Moving on now to mission. It's about growing the kingdom, isn't it? The Great Commission is about making disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That quote from Matthew 8:28 we have there. And we're a good church in terms of mission. We give away a lot of money, and we aspire to give away more than 10% of our pledged income each year. But I'd like to see us sharpen the focus on our mission in terms of our outreach and our mission, looking at a fewer number of organisations and allocating them between St Barnabas and the Lantern and ourselves, in terms of allocating them more distinctly between the three churches. And also, after Bishop Samuel's visit here to Canford recently, I'd like us to have more focus on our brothers and sisters in the Sudan. And the idea really is for everyone in the church to get involved in our mission work. Now, moving on to one of the new areas, truth and social justice. And this is about growing in care. And we're moving on to the next slide. We're not particularly good, I don't think, in the church generally at focusing on social justice issues. And yet, this is an area that both Salisbury Diocese and the new Archbishop, Justin, is wanting the church to really be focusing on. So I think we should have a clear voice on some of the many issues of social justice that are confronting us today. I'd also like to see us do more to serve through things like prison visiting and through serving the homeless and people in less fortunate positions to us. And of course, finally, to speak out on issues where we see the authority and the inspiration of the Bible being compromised. For example, on the recent discussions about marriage. And we certainly had a clear voice on that, but we probably need to raise the profile of that somewhat. So that brings us on to our fifth and final and new area of community action. And this is something about growing in number, growing the number of people involved in the church. It's about growing a fringe, really. People who aren't necessarily members of our church, but share common interests and common values. And it's a great way of connecting people with what we do as a church. And moving on to this next slide, the Kingfisher project, we can see through this project, which I'm going to share with you now, I think a great opportunity for us to grow in number, a number of people who we'll come into contact with through this community action objective. Now, the idea is about making God and all that he's given us accessible to all. But what does that mean? And that's what the Kingfisher Project is all about. And, well, we've been given an awful lot, haven't we? We've been given a fantastic church. We've got great facilities here. We've got great people here. And we've got this wonderful environment that we saw particularly at the Jubilee celebrations, where we invited lots of members from the community, from the local school, the Canford school here, to a big event here to celebrate the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. And we reckoned, getting on for 1,000 people who joined us in the course of that whole day. And it just really gave us a glimpse, I think, of what is possible in terms of connecting with our community. So what is the Kingfisher Project? Well, it's the idea is to build a trail, a kind of like a nature trail, alongside the River Stour here, just by the entrance opposite the Canford School, and viewing areas alongside the River Stour, so that people who are disabled are able to get down to quite close to the water's edge, and also to have a view up and down the river from a couple of vantage points. The idea also is to open up the CMC and make it much more of a community venue, not only for people who might be visiting, might be a disabled group who are visiting the river venue for the day, but also local people who are walking the trail between Wimborne and the other, the part of this, the trail that goes through Canford, that they can drop in, have a cup of coffee, use the loos. And so it's to open up the CMC and the church to allow access to the facilities that we have that we'd like to share with our community. Finally, the last part of the project is to create a parallel project in the Sudan, particularly aimed at disabled people, based on a 10% tithe, the 10% of what we raise as a church here, to go into a project in the Sudan. And there's absolutely nothing for disabled people in the Sudan, in South Sudan, at the moment. And I was talking to Bishop Samuel about this, and he thought this was a great idea to bless people in the part of the world in which he lives. So who is our community? Well, of course, the community is our church, including the Breakfast 9 people. It's Canford School here, it's Canford Village, and the people who live on the Merley estate. But it's also all the other people who use the river area as an amenity, dog walkers, those who to row and paddle up the river in their kayaks. And it's also those we want to bless, the disabled people who at the moment are denied access to the river, and anyone else who's disadvantaged, unable to really get down here and use the amenities that we enjoy. So what is the idea now? This next slide suggests creating a car park for disabled and able-bodied people, just the other side of the gateway down to the river, and then between the boathouse and the suspension bridge that's just now being refurbished, to create an observation area, like a decking area, with perhaps a covered area, where people can sit and enjoy the river. And I'd like to see it actually extended up beyond the boathouse, up towards the kink in the river a bit further up, with a nature trail along there, and another second observation area built there. But we would need to get permission, of course, from both Canford School, Borough of Poole, and the landowner to do that. And that's in progress. Those discussions are in progress at the moment. So what does it look like? Well, and where would it be? Well, it is right there by the riverside. And in this next slide, you just see the sort of beautiful area in which we live, looking across from our side of the river towards the Wimborne side of the river. And this is just one part of a beautiful vista of river and fields and reed beds full of wildlife, with people rowing up the river, lots of things going on, people walking their dogs and things like that. It's a great amenity area to be enjoyed by all. Who will benefit? Well, we will benefit, of course, as a local church, but disabled people, both locally here in Canford, but also those in the Sudan will benefit from this Kingfisher project. We could involve people who are involved in community service, having to serve their community service, by getting them to help and volunteer down here, clearing weeds and bushes and things to give a better access to the river. Canford School would benefit. We could work with them on a joint community project. Visiting schools, take Montacute School here, might want to visit for the afternoon, and they could come here down to the Riverside project, but also come here to the CMC to enjoy the amenities of our church centre. Also visitors, of course, would benefit. So what would we need to do to make this a reality? Well, I think the first thing would be to form a project team to plan the project. And this is going to take people with a wide range of expertise, people involved in planning, in estimating costs, in finance, in the environment. We need to get a sort of cross-functional project team together to see how much it's going to cost, whether it's possible to do these things in the first place, and to just generally plan the feasibility. I'd really like us to have an experiment, to do a worship experiment for 6 months to look at our new pattern of worship and see how that works. We need to think about fundraising. We need some seed corn money to look at feasibility, the feasibility study of the whole Kingfisher project. And then, of course, we'd need to implement it in phases. The first thing we do, of course, would be to implement the waterside part of the project, and that would mean working with Canford School and Borough of Poole to make that happen. The second phase would be changes to the Canford Magna Centre, and we've already got plans for doing that, which is to extend our hall and create a store where our current shed is and sort of patio area out the back, and to move the office from the current office to a new office at the front with a new entrance lobby, and to move the existing kitchen into our current office space. And then I'd like us also to think about some kind of cafe veranda area facing onto the road. This next slide shows the new hall, which would mean that we'd have space, instead of about 70 odd people at the moment, we'd be able to increase that to over 100, perhaps up to even 120 with the new hall space. And we'd have this wonderful cafe area, which we could do with making some new doors both onto that veranda, but then a new entrance perhaps onto the road. So that's the CMC. Next slide shows me in the Sudan with Bishop Samuel and Bishop Samuel's disabled son, Joseph, and he's being cared for there by an American aid worker. And as I said, there's absolutely nothing for disabled people in the Sudan, and what a blessing it would be to Joseph and to others to have facilities, transport facilities, to play facilities specifically designed for them. Finally, phase 4 would be to reorder the church, and this is a slide that many of you have seen before. It's not our church, but it's a similar church, a Grade 1 listed building, where they've managed to reorder the space and to create a flexible worship space. I'm not going to argue about the colour of the carpet or the colour of the chairs. That can all, of course, be changed. But this just gives you an idea what can be done. Similarly, with the next slide, we see the back of the church, the west end of the church, reordered very beautifully here with light oak wood. And we could do something similar in Canford with our West End, which is currently quite cluttered, and we have a very large organ obscuring the stained glass windows. And it's possible that we could do something about changing that, creating a loo and a small kitchen area underneath that gallery to provide amenities within this flexible worship space. So here we are. This is the Canford vision, the 5 areas with worship right at the centre. It is a vision for growth, so it's not changed dramatically in that respect, but it includes these 2 new areas of truth and social justice and community action. The essence, I suppose, looking at this final slide, is making God and all that he's given to us accessible to all. The many good things, the spiritual things that he's given us, making those accessible to all through our worship and our discipleship, our outreach and mission, but also the wonderful environment that we have here at Canford, making that too accessible to all. Now, if you'd come to the Vision Refresh morning, you would have been able to pick up a card, and there's still cards in church which says either that you're highly enthusiastic or totally uninspired by this new vision. I'd love you to fill out this card and return it with your comments to the church office, or to email me, rector@canfordparish.org, so that we could hear your views on this new vision refresh. So thanks for listening, and I do hope that you are highly inspired and enthusiastic by this new refreshed vision. Thanks for listening.